Everybody, welcome to another webinar from Reuters Events Insurance. I'm Brian Falchuk, your moderator for today. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book series, The Future of Insurance from Disruption to Evolution. And speaking about the evolution that we have going on, we are talking today about the move from, or the move through low touch and into no touch claims. Claims evolution specifically. How do we combine rapid claims innovation with making sure we still have quality customer care as we move to more touchless or straight through processing environments? Obviously, this has been a time of rapid transformation for the industry leading up to last year, but certainly accelerated in the past 12, 18 months that we've all been facing and going through. And while that has pushed us forward, there is clearly no moving back for us as an industry. We have new thinking, new competitors, new ways of working, and from the customer side, certainly new demands for innovation in how we serve them. And the question is, how do you make that transformation and still stand by the promise, the quality, all the things that you stand to deliver as you stand by your customers through whatever they face. So making sure that you still have the quality you insist on bringing to the market. I am joined in this conversation today by Teresa King, who's Senior Vice President and Chief Claims Officer for Encova Insurance, Michael Anderson, who's the Global Practice Lead for Guidewire Ecosystem at Guidewire Software, and Kate Dodson, who is the Claims Operation Leader for Ohio Mutual Insurance Group. So a good mix of perspectives in the conversation today. We will do a bit of talking, but then really turn it over to you, the audience, which means your Q&A. So bring us your questions. We will discuss them. There's a little Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. Make sure you use that to submit your questions. Don't just put them in the chat, throw them into the Q&A. And you can do that at any point in the conversation. I will make sure that we bring as many of your questions to the panel today as possible. So with that, I want to get out of the way to start bringing some thoughts in from our great panel. And Teresa, if I can start with you. So Teresa King, who is the Chief Claims Officer for Encova Insurance. Teresa, share some thoughts with us today.
Great. Thanks, Brian. I'm happy to be here today to chat about this very relevant topic. At Encova, we began a holistic claims transformation about 7 years ago. Technology is changing faster than we can change our processes and systems. There's access to data, systems, and people 24/7. I think we're all challenged to be innovative and just to remain relevant today. And our project has run parallel to our corporate project to undergo a complete systems transformation to implement Guidewire for policy, billing, and claims across all lines of business. So with a mega multi-million-dollar project of that size and scope, we knew that would transform our business across all levels of the organization. We also knew that we would need to do some heavy lifting to transform our business operations in the claims organization. We also knew it would take many years to develop and implement this type of a project, and that while this was going on, we would continue to need to work on 5 legacy systems, plus one more when we deployed ClaimCenter. So it was obvious that we would need to make changes and innovate, or we would no longer be able to remain relevant or be able to sustain the service demands that our policyholders expected and absolutely deserved. So our claims transformation resulted in business innovation and automation, even while working on multiple legacy systems and deploying a new system. So I think sometimes people get caught up in the fact that they think that it's difficult or challenging to deploy new things while you're working on multiple systems, and that you have to wait until you get on that one system, that you can't deploy new or innovative things. And you really can. So we accomplished this basically through key foundational organizational structure changes and functional changes. We made operational process improvements, And it was a balance between business partnerships and very strategic integrations with technology and virtual tools. And as a result, I believe we've been able to adapt to the market changes. By taking a very measured approach to automation, I believe we're on our way to touchless claims. And I say that because we're not where we want to be yet, because we're not on one claim system yet. Like I say, we've been on this road for 7 years, and we've done this in phases. And we're about 2 years out from being completely on one claim system. So we still have a way to go. So until then, there are other components such as artificial intelligence and uh, predictive analytics that we're yet to fully integrate until we're, where we want to be. But you know, you're always in a state of continuous improvement. So I don't know that you'll ever get completely where you want to be. But I'd like to share a few of the critical success factors that that were helpful to us during our claims transformation and our automation efforts. So strong leadership and a culture to drive change and associate engagement was really important for us. Doing that comprehensive gap analysis, and that needed to include people, process, and technology. It can't just be technology related. You've really got to have that holistic view. Developing a vision and a mission, followed by that short-term and long-term strategic roadmap. And then when we looked at our organizational structure and we're addressing our people, we looked at the entire way that we did business. So we looked at the way we functioned. We ended up deploying specialization across our organization. We looked at the roles and the positions. We looked at our bench strength. We did a talent assessment. We looked at span of control. And we needed to ensure that we had the right people in the right roles for optimal performance. And from there, we streamlined our business operations, our processes, our procedures for consistency. Because of the way we were operating on multiple systems, we needed to make sure it looked the same and felt the same experience to that end customer while operating on those systems. And we wanted to make sure we capitalized on the efficiencies that would be gained from implementing that new system. And also to right-size the organization from streamlining these operations. So we made sure that we took the approach that we changed the way we did business in order to gain the efficiencies from the new system that we were implementing, rather than, and designed our structure basically to function well within that, rather than configuring a new system to operate the old way we were doing business. So it was really important that we think differently and change the way we did things. Also, in looking at innovation, change can be incremental, and we did our projects through many phases. So it doesn't have to be disruptive to be impactful. And the key for us was to be in a constant state of continuous improvement and have good monitoring in place. So you need to remain flexible and adapt quickly. So you have to be able to make corrective measures when something needs to change and something isn't working right. Our motto was make something better today than it was yesterday. And it also got your associates in that constant change management mode, that you're willing to make those adaptive changes when something isn't quite working right. So I'd also like to highlight a few of the tools that we implemented along our journey. So for general claims handling, we implemented texting capabilities with a standalone software so that customers could send photographs and estimates and other documents. Chatbot was implemented for our first notice of loss. DocuSign and eNotary program to streamline our processes there. EFT and debit cards for additional payment solutions. We created an agent portal so that we get a real-time view of claim status, financials, reserves, file notes, that sort of thing. We deployed recorded releases to expedite settlement on smaller injury losses. We have used some robotics to auto-populate data, for example, some large loss and reinsurance reporting. And we further developed our analytics, because analytics, of course, is so important for real-time dashboards, scoring, root cause and trend analysis for our QA, for customer satisfaction surveys, for our KPI metrics. That's a lot of what we did for our general claims handling. For specific functions like property claims handling, we implemented several tools to streamline handling of those losses. So the structure of property was we had a field unit, a GA, large loss handling, and an inside unit. And we deployed Hover for digital damage capture that allows the customer to take photos and submit through an app. And then Hover supplies the measurements, diagrams, and a 3D rendering of the property so that we could virtually handle claims from the inside. Aerial imagery, we used a third-party service to secure aerial images, and that is directly integrated into our property estimating system. And we use that on every single roof claim. And that gives us pre-loss photos and measurements and diagrams. Weather analytics. We use several real-time sources where we have that integrated with our policy system and our estimating system. And we overlay that with our policy in force count. And so following a storm, we know exactly where the damage is concentrated and with our policies, and we can deploy our resources quite efficiently and effectively and respond to storms right away. We also use services, vendor services to provide digital flooring, siding and shingle matching and pricing services. We utilize a customer-facing portal to process contents losses, and that's very much streamlined direct contact with our policyholders and digital handling of contents claims. Of course, we do on-site property estimating with our laptops and Xactware software for instant delivery of property estimates, but we've also recently deployed mobile technology through use of iPads. And as I mentioned, our inside desk unit, they are equipped also with our property software to write estimates. And so they utilize the Hover and the contents portal, but they also utilize contractor network in lieu of independent adjusters. And then to provide photos and diagrams and measurements so that we can then write our own estimates virtually. So that, of course, has helped tremendously during this pandemic. So we've handled so many virtual claims in that way. And the same as with property, we've done similar things with our material damage unit, which is structured very similarly with a field, an inside unit, and a heavy equipment and a total loss unit. So inside unit is equipped with the CCC estimating software and can write estimates virtually from the inside. We have Quick Estimate, which is a mobile app plus a web link for those customers that don't want to put an app on their phone to do photo estimating for desk appraising. We have a virtual estimating tool for heavy equipment losses. We use a predictive review for estimate accuracy and scoring for our estimates. And for then total losses, for that total loss unit, we employ predictive and smart total loss for digital images to quickly identify total losses, and triage and photos so that we can virtually handle total losses and resolve them very quickly. We use an e-signature program to streamline title processing and a web portal for digital powers of attorney. So those are pretty much the things we've deployed at a high level to help us virtually and do touchless claims. So I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Yeah,
Hopefully this is helpful.
it's great specificity in a two major lines. We actually already have some questions that have come in, and I think you've spoken to a few of those. So keep the questions coming, and that was really helpful, Teresa. I think one of the things that you showed really clearly is you're on this core system evolution as a company, but then you listed a lot of real tools that you've actually deployed throughout lots of different phases of the claim lifecycle in different products, some external facing, some internal, some new ways of working internally, like you said, using RPA to help with report generation, which is an interesting use, right? Not just to automate the outward facing flow of the process. So you've really shown, even when you have something that at first glance we may say, no, you know what, we can't do anything else, we've got this big change going on, you're still able to do a very large number of transformational pieces of the puzzle that clearly last year and still are incredibly necessary, but certainly going forward, the necessity is not going to change. So this is a great demonstration of that.
Thank you.
Michael, I wonder if you might be able to bring some view from across the industry, given that Guidewire sees so many different contexts out there, and share some of what you're seeing on the move that the industry's been going through.
Sure. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Teresa. As my role here within Guidewire, I do have the privilege to work with multiple insurance companies across the globe. But I think unilaterally, the constant theme within any claims discussion with every insurer, if claims automation isn't their number one strategic objective, it's arguably number two. So it is at the forefront of I think, every insurer claim organization strategy. And I think Teresa highlighted a few things I just jotted down. One, the ability to change faster, right? The rate of technology, and arguably, I think many insureds today are looking and comparing their claims experience not to that against other insurance companies, but their experience for which they may have with maybe Netflix or Amazon. So that type of experience they're looking for their P&C insurance company to deliver throughout that claims process. And that does require insurers to have the ability to change faster. She also highlighted the need to have increased flexibility, to be adaptive, right? Even with claims automation, I think everyone recognizes that as insurers go forward with their claims automation strategy, probably not going to get it right the first time, probably not going to get it right the second time. It's going to be an evolution. It's going to be a journey for claims automation, not a particular event, if you will. And Teresa also touched base on ecosystem partners, right? Who you do business with and how you do business with and how they contribute information into that claims automation is something that I'll talk about in a few. And then, of course, analytics, not just operational analytics, but predictive analytics is paramount to claims automation as well, and needs to be interwoven into an insurance company strategy. But as I meet with insurers and my colleagues here at Guidewire, I think it's safe to partition insurance organizations into three broad categories. Not surprising, you're going to have laggers, you're going to have leaders, and then you're going to have your visionaries as it pertains to claims automation. The laggers, they're still in the early planning phases. They don't have much of a strategy as it pertains to claims automation. Most of their processes still are manual based. They don't look much different today than they may have 10 years ago. And I think long-term, that's going to put them at a disadvantage. Within the leader category, I think it's anywhere from basic to advanced. And we see some insurers that have in excess of 70% of their claims fully automated for certain lines of business, right? And they generally are the low complexity, high volume. It may be travel, it may be property contents, it may be other fairly simple type of claims. But they've been able to create workflows and create business rules that with a high degree of automation, with a high degree of accuracy. And then we have some, what I call the ambitious. They're somewhere in between. They've started their claims automation journey. They may have somewhere between 10 to 30% of their claims, some of which may be end-to-end, fully touchless and automated, but largely have automated certain steps in the claims process, not the full touchless claims, which I think that too is fine. I think, many organizations have a vision that we may not be successful in claims automation if we don't achieve that full touchless experience. Well, that I think is the utopia, that's the end game. But there's also considerable value in looking at your processes today across all lines of business and say, how can I automate incremental steps in that process, particularly those that involve considerable time, that add unit costs to your loss adjustment expense, that really don't provide any significant customer-facing value. And then, there's some that are basic, right? They're still, within maybe that 0 to 10% automation. They're really just starting their journey, but I kind of put them in that leader category because they have that vision and they're working aggressively towards it. And then there's the visionaries, right? There's some for which we speak to, they're really reimagining the claims process. And much like Teresa said, they're not looking at a claim as to how they've always done claims in the past. But if you were to start an insurance company today, what might that claims journey look like? And releasing themselves of all the debt of traditional claims processing, taking an automation first approach, manual being the exception. And then, these visionaries, they're exploring the new agile technologies that exist today, becoming less IT dependent and increase business owner configuration so they can achieve that business agility that Teresa alluded to. And that's really needed in full automation, particularly at scale. You can't, every time you need to make a change, and as you learn throughout your claims automation experience, you can't always go back to IT and put that burden on IT, because you're going to be waiting 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 24 months to get that feature. And by then, I think the visionaries, they're way down the road, right? They're off and running without that IT debt. And then, of course, creating, these visionaries, they're really creating their competitive advantages by harnessing their ecosystems, achieving the value and effect and capabilities well beyond the scope of any individual actor within their ecosystem, but truly the 1 + 1 = 3 holistically. And then, so, that's a lot. And I think some insurers that we talked to, they struggle. How do I get there? And first and foremost, I think never lose sight of the customer, right? And really creating that customer experience. And I think many of us within the industry, whether you work on the insurance claim side or whether you work on the technology side, we tend to lose sight because we're biased. We're in this industry. Keep your solutions simple. I always say, think of my mom as you develop out your solutions, but define that customer's North Star. What do you want their experience to be like in a perfect world? And then backfill from there. How can you potentially achieve that? Maybe not in 6 months, but in a year or 2 years. And certainly there's technologies today, particularly, SaaS-based cloud offerings that are providing tremendous advantages in terms of executing on your automation strategy. The use of microservices and RESTful APIs provides that agility that doesn't necessarily exist in now non-cloud solutions. And part of that advantage too is the capabilities of low code or no code deployments. And this holds true whether it be for business rules, and Teresa talked about predictive analytics and how you go about integrating that, workflow configurations, all your integrations. I think the long-term success will be looking towards those solutions and how I encapsulate and bring in all those capabilities without coding every single time that I do or every single time that I need to make an update. That will enable higher degrees of automation. And like I said earlier, it doesn't need to be an all or nothing approach. Start simple and get more sophisticated as you move. And I spoke about the ecosystem a few times, and I think this really becomes an integral component. And it starts with a modern core system, of course, taking advantage of the cloud technologies, but also partner integrations. When you think about an adjuster today, he or she is taking pieces of information, even in a simple auto physical damage claim. They're looking at potentially a fraud report that may come in from LexisNexis or Verisk. They're looking at a collision estimate. They're looking and correlating how much rental does that need to, so they may have the enterprise integration. But you want to ensure that they're putting all that information together almost as if it's a mosaic throughout the claims process, and they're making decisions on each piece of information because it's all intertwined toward your ultimate outcome. So a claims automation initiative needs to consider those same decision variables, but in a structured data format, right? So as you develop your claims automation strategy, how you integrate with your partners and the level of granularity of data for which you need from those partners in your ecosystem becomes increasingly important, not only to move it through the workflow, but also from an analytics perspective, which is another part of the ecosystem. You want to ensure you, of course, have a good fraud solution as part of your claims automation initiative, that you have your traditional business intelligence, integrated predictive analytics, and ultimately a data lake, a streaming of live data to create that continuous loop and feed your predictive analytics and feed your workflow, and harnessing the benefit of past experiences introduced into your new claims automation process. And lastly, you want to provide that visibility into your customer, right? Give them the amount of information for which they need to keep them informed, reduce the number of inbound calls coming into your call center, but balancing, you want to ensure that you give them the right amount of information at the right time. Information overload can detract them from engagement, ensure that you're delivering value to your customer. And then from a competitive perspective, and I think either Kate or Teresa alluded to this as well, but you want to, first and foremost, I think you want to include everybody in the organization, get their input, make them part of the solution, ensure that claims automation isn't perceived a threat. I know as a former claims adjuster, there are so many activities that really didn't enhance my career. I wanted nothing else to get them off of my desk. So maybe some of those are a great place to start. Let me adjudicate, investigate, and settle claims, which is really what you're paying me for. And make automation all about the customer. Deliver their North Star, not your North Star. Keep your customer at the focus point. And don't be anchored to today's processes. Think out of the box. Get the brightest people in your organization together and define what claims might look like. And then prioritize predictive analytics over business rules. I think one of the challenges, even among those that are highly automated today for particular lines of business, they're almost capping their capabilities because they've created a monolith of business rules, and it's becoming very hard for them to manage. So predictive analytics can displace many business rules. So I think there's a balance there between predictive analytics and business rules to facilitate claims automation. And then involve your data teams early. Despite specific, define your specific operational analytics required for claims automation. You want to ensure that you understand what your consumer behavior is for self-service claims. Where might they be abandoning in the claims process? Where are they leaving? Know how your predictive models are performing. Have those metrics to ensure that they're performing as you intended. As with all predictive models, there will be degradation over time, so make sure you track that. And then your traditional metrics, cycle times, indemnity spend, and the like, I think are all important for, and what we see our customers measuring as part of their claims automation initiative. And last but not least, I think this is something that often fails to get discussed as everybody gets so excited about claims automation, is the exception process. Right? Things may start off as fully automated, and ideally you want it to go from start to finish and be fully automated. But we all know the reality is that a significant percentage of those are going to kick out into a manual process. So don't just focus your strategy on the utopia end-to-end claims automation. Make sure you have a highly effective manual exception process that can be monitored by individuals, evaluated by those individuals, and ideally reintroduced back into the automated process, or if not, taken out and then manually adjudicated from that point forward. All the while keeping your customer informed. So just kind of in conclusion, I think claims automation, it's not an easy journey. If it were, it would have been done by now. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. Focus on the customer, embrace the new technologies that will make you highly agile. It's a journey, not an event. Create your differentiation through your ecosystems. Have a strong exception workflow plan, and then of course, as we all do within claims, make sure you measure the benefits, the results, and areas to improve.
Great, thank you for that, Michael. And a lot of great points, and quite a bit that echoes some of the values and the approaches that Teresa brought up about, it's continuous. You can run a lot of these things simultaneously, looking for some of the lightweight, more modern solutions that you can deploy much more easily, even when the underlying technology is in the midst of change, and engaging your people throughout that process. Kate, you already have a specific question, and I'm trying not to go into the specific ones that have come in, but this one I think is probably on lots of people's mind, is what musicians do you have in your background? So if you don't mind taking us through the pictures back there. I spot some of them, but there's a few that I can't make out with the glare and everything.
We have Jim Morrison, George Harrison, Tom Petty, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Eddie Vedder, Joe Walsh, and Paul McCartney.
It's a good mix. I thought they were all British for a minute, but you've got an international mix there.
Yep.
So, all right. So inquiring minds want to know, and now we can get back on topic. Yep. But you're the claims operations leader for Ohio Mutual Group. Tell us about your perspective.
Sure. Yes. And thank you for having me. And Teresa and Michael both, what they talked about, I think kind of sets me up perfectly for what I had planned to say. And I'm going to approach this in two ways. I want to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of how we approach creating an innovative and continuous improvement culture, and then some of the specific initiatives that we're working on to kind of live that out through our processes. So what Michael said about the utopia of this true no-touch process, it's interesting to me because we don't approach any project really at Ohio Mutual with this idea of we're going to eliminate touch, but it's about maximizing the value of the touch that the adjuster has to have with each claim. And hopefully by doing that through use of technology and process changes, we can improve our efficiency and give more fulfillment for the claim reps so that they are able to be just more challenged by their work every day. They can focus on their coverage investigations, their liability investigations, and less on data entry. And then all of that should translate into a better customer experience overall. And then that really starts for us at our CEO level. He brings this innovative culture to life. And how that kind of manifests itself is we don't really, if we come up with an idea or a process, or there's a new partner we want to explore, we don't often hear no, you can't do that. No, we need to do that later. We're encouraged to explore all of those opportunities. And that gives all of us the confidence to keep bringing new things to the forefront and keep exploring what the possibilities out there really are. And, we're a small organization. I know there are some organizations out there who may be lucky enough to have a dedicated team to innovation or things like that. But we do have an innovation committee that is comprised of people across our whole organization. Some are frontline associates, some are leaders in different departments, but we all come together on a regular basis to talk about what kind of new technology is out there, what insurtechs are coming to the forefront that we might want to take advantage of. And it really provides us with a great opportunity because rather than exploring these opportunities in our silos of just claims or underwriting, we're talking about them broadly. And we can see if there's any impact that could potentially come from these different processes or technology across our entire organization. And then we also have continuous improvement and customer experience leaders that's what they focus on, and they help lead us through the organization, but we have champions in each department as well who also drive that forward. And then more at our departmental level for claims, we have a process that I think is pretty unique. It is a claims and IT, we call it our working group, and we get together regularly. It's leaders across all lines of business, and then our entire claims IT team. So we have developers, business analysts, their leaders, all in a room together. And of course, we talk about prioritization and what they're working on. But the greatest benefit we've had is we have all these learning experiences happening. So claims is learning what's possible through technology, maybe specifically automation. Are there payments we can automate? Are there certain processes we can automate to get data into fields easier? What can we do from a technology standpoint? But then our technology team is also learning from us. what we see the future of claims looking like. And this has led to so many different creative solutions for us of where we might start down a path on a project, determine that it's not really going the way we thought it was going to go. And our IT team actually comes up with an idea saying, you know, we know how your process works. We've been thinking about this and we think we can do this list of things to make it work for you. So that's been really successful. And then even going a step further, we have a visual management system in place that we have been working on for a little while now to solicit feedback from our associates. And this might be something that they heard from agents, something they heard from customers, workflow challenges they're running into, feedback on processes we've already rolled out. If there's something that they're experiencing that's not our intent, these are things that when they're experiencing it throughout the course of their day, they may, in a typical world, just think of it and then it slips their mind and nobody ever finds out about it. Now they have a place to put this information. And I don't want to sound like I'm exaggerating and saying we get all these ideas every day, but really nearly every day we're getting feedback from our associates telling us ideas that they have, what they want to see our claim system do. And we're in real time getting these ideas and being able to act upon them. Some things we can do right away, some things we put as a future enhancement, but it's really helped us in getting that feedback from our associates and creating that innovative culture from the top to all the way down through the rest of our organization. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of how we get these things to work for us. But specifically, I'll start with first notice of loss. We do have a process where the customer can report a claim. If it's a certain type of auto claim, they can take pictures, then an estimate's completed and we issue payment. And that's pretty close to this low touch, no touch process that we have going. But we don't want to stop just with the more simple claims. So we're actually right now looking at blockchain technology and what a distributed ledger can do for us in solving problems with the more complicated multi-vehicle accidents where our claim reps are spending a lot of time going back and forth with the other insurance company, either reporting a claim, having a claim reported to us, information's being updated, do we have the right information? How can blockchain help us in solving that problem in an automated way, not spending so much time doing the back and forth? Also looking into telematics and figuring out if we can get some very crucial accident data right up front. And that's not going to replace the claim rep taking statements and asking all the right questions, but what it does is it allows them to have more details that are concrete at their fingertips. They're not having to take someone's word of, oh, I was going the speed limit, or have to say, well, I think based on the damage, maybe you weren't. They'll actually have that data right there to be able to get the claim and start working it most effectively. And then also, what data can we get at the start of a claim that right now our adjusters are having to go to maybe 2 or 3 systems to find today? If it's other carrier information, just information about a vehicle for a claimant, anything like that, can we at the click of a button bring that data into the claim, potentially even before the rep even sees it? And then that should allow us to be able to triage these claims, get them to the right person at the right time. And that's just, it's a complicated process. Anybody who's ever assigned claims before or tried to program a system to automatically assign claims, it's always much more complicated than what people think it's going to be. So the more information we have up front, the better. And then we also focus on communication and providing options for our customers. And for us, I'll focus on communication. We started with statusing in an insured portal and an agent portal, milestone statusing that they could go out and log in and find. And then we thought, you know, there's some information at certain milestones that customers are going to want to know. And can we push that to them? So we've just launched an initiative where we're now actively pushing notifications to customers at those key milestones and providing them with information that we know they're going to want to have, whether that's adjuster information, payment specific information, or even something like, hey, we've tried to reach you by phone or whatever. Why don't you try to reach us in a way that's convenient for you? We'll reach out again as well, but you can email us, you can text us, you can call us. And speaking of texting, that was a big one for us, is being able to have the two-way conversation with the customer. It really helped us eliminate, I guess I shouldn't say eliminate, never eliminates phone calls and voicemails entirely, but it did significantly reduce the amount of phone calls and voicemails that our claim reps have to receive for simple questions. If the customer is willing and wants to text, they can send a quick question to our adjusters and they can be answering those potentially while doing something else, or at least much faster than if they were listening to a voicemail, calling back, maybe getting their voicemail again, and going through that cycle over and over and over. There's other things that I had planned to mention, but I don't want to repeat a lot of what Teresa said. Like, we do a lot with electronic signatures, and payment options is one that we're really focused on right now, providing those additional payment options. We also are utilizing Hover, and we see that as a great safety tool for our adjusters as well. People can take pictures and you're getting a measurement of a roof. That's a lot better than potentially having somebody up on a roof having to take those measurements. So we're doing all of those things. But the last thing I do want to talk about is the data analytics and kind of what we would consider a typical audit. We're in the process right now of evaluating that whole process of auditing. We want to focus on sentence data. We feel like fields are great. The fields that we have in a claim system are wonderful and you can get a lot of information, but adjusters put a lot in their claim notes. And today it's really hard to pull out that information because you might be doing a file audit of a specific number of files, somebody's taking the time to review them, and you're getting this small snapshot of what's happening. We're looking at technology of where we can get contextual results based on sentence data. We can plot milestones. We can truly figure out what's happening across the board with our claims at an adjuster level, at a claim line of business level, or at a department level, and make decisions based off of what we're finding from that data. So those are just a few of the things that we're working on, and I'll wrap up there, but this is definitely a very exciting time to be in insurance. The opportunities for us right now are limitless, and I think we've all said our jobs are probably never going to be done. We're going to be doing this all the time, and it's exciting to see what's next.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you mentioned some of the, I think, interesting, cutting edge, new kinds of things going on. I mean, all of you have really, and because we're seeing such a different perspective from lots of different carriers, obviously Teresa and Kate, your two in particular, and Michael looking across the industry, there isn't a theme that only carriers of this size or of this type would put in solution X, Y, or Z. Kate, you mentioned blockchain, right? So that's something that I think has been elusive to many in the industry, but is starting to show some value. And that's something that Ohio Mutual is looking at. And then, you've got both of you working with Hover. So, different carriers, different scale, and yet you're also looking at the same sort of, again, cutting edge AI based kind of, computer vision solution. So nothing's off the table for anyone, I think, is a point of hope that we should all think about. Thank you for all the feedback and for going through the musicians behind you, Kate, putting you on the spot there with that.
Absolutely.
We have had some great questions coming in, and just in the moments that I was rambling just then, we had even more. So I want to try to pick and choose a few. To start us off, there's actually a number of questions that are getting at this: is where do we start with touchless claims? Is there a particular line of business or claim type that makes the most sense? And I want to redirect this question a little bit, because I think the standard answer is, yeah, it's on the simpler stuff, the repeatable stuff, the lower severity, higher frequency. We can guess what a lot of that looks like. So, certainly feel free to speak to that, but maybe adding a nuance to this of where might there be a surprise. So did we think that, that's not something, and to Michael's point, like that's one of those exceptions that's going to drop out. So we're not going to do that. But actually you found that maybe it's not 100% touchless, but there are pieces of the puzzle, even in claims that might have surprised you at first glance. actually there is room for automation there. So Teresa, can we start with you? Because you've got a pretty broad mix between the original motorist book and then also the comp book when you guys came together and created Encova. So you have a really wide range of claims, personal and commercial, that you see. I'm curious if there's a standard place to start, but if maybe there's some surprises as well.
Well, I think that there's so many pieces of a claim that can be touchless. And I agree with Kate that I don't think that the whole claim has to be touchless. I mean, glass claims, completely touchless. Tow claims, completely touchless. I think that if you have good fraud analytics, you can put in, maybe your smaller contents claims, your small, maybe property and auto first party claims with no liability, things like that. The same thing you mentioned, the low frequency, low dollar claims. But I think that with adjuster involvement, like we have casualty and material damage that share so much of the claims that you could investigate liability, and then you could still have the physical damage portion be a touchless part of the claim. So you can integrate different parts of a claim and have self-service parts of it, yet adjuster involvement at maybe the front end of it. Or, then we have certain functions that peel off where we have the medical portion completely with a separate person. So that part of the claim doesn't have to be touchless, but maybe the physical damage portion can be. So depending on how you're orged or structured, you can certainly automate and have certain portions of the claim still be very automated, but other portions where you want to have that human touch. And maybe it's from a customer service standpoint, maybe it's from an investigative standpoint, maybe it's from that fraud or just the handling portion of it. So those are just the rules that you put in place or how you're structured that you can work those workflows.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not all or nothing. I mean, to your original point with change, right? It's not all or nothing. Michael's point, it's not a single point in time. They're pieces of the puzzle. You can look to remove, and Michael was saying that lots of the things that an adjuster has to do aren't necessarily the fun parts of the job. Don't feel like you're contributing to putting that person's life back together or adjudicating the claims, or those things that you can automate so that the human pieces can step in faster and more smoothly. Kate, what's your perspective from Ohio Mutual?
Yeah, I think Teresa hit a lot of points about the low-hanging fruit of what you can start to automate. So I'll talk mainly to your point, Brian, about like what's surprising or what is out there that might be possible. And I'm going to go back to when I did mention blockchain and distributed ledger, because that, for me, when we started having these conversations and we were learning that there's possibilities of removing that step of the carrier interaction, and not entirely, there's going to be times where you'll have to have conversations with the other carrier, but we were doing, and I know it varies across different organizations of whether you report a claim for your customer to another carrier or you have them do that themselves, but that's a service that we do. We will report a claim to another carrier if our insured would like us to. And whether our reps are doing that or we have an administrative associate doing that, it is a lot of time for them to be spending. And it's not a huge value add necessarily. I mean, obviously it's going to move a claim forward, but these calls can take up to 20 minutes, and then you report it and it's like this snapshot in time of we've reported it, here's the information we have. But if they update information and we wind up needing it, we probably aren't getting it back, and vice versa. And so it's been fun to kind of learn about what the possibilities are with this technology of, can we have this back and forth communication in an instant? Can we find out in an instant that our insured was involved in an accident with Encova? And we can share information back and forth. And if it's winds up being our insured and it's a mistake, can we reject that and get it out? But if it is between us, then can we quickly get this information and start moving things forward, where today it could take days for some of those things to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that actually can open the door for automation in some of these surprising areas.
Right.
Because you wouldn't have thought, it's complicated, it's multi-party, maybe there's bodily injury involved, but now you're smoothing out some of that process. Michael, I wonder if you have any surprise areas where carriers have been able to bring automation levels up that aren't necessarily some of the low-hanging fruit we would normally think about for bringing in more touchless processing.
Well, I think much of it's been discussed, Brian. I think we generally see most customers levitate towards initially those high frequency, low severity, predominantly your auto physical damage. I agree with what Teresa alluded to. You're going to see, maybe one feature of the claim go automated, another aspect or another feature of the claim be manual touch. I think workers' comp, medical only type claims is something that we see insurers applying a high degree of automation towards. The travel business, and even in property, sometimes it might be food spoilage, debris removal, some of those types of claims. They may not be that frequent, but they're fairly simple in terms of complexity. Generally, that's what we see across most insurers, and I'm sure there's many surprises out there that I just don't have visibility into, because I'm sure they're applying portions of automation to segments of many claims.
Sure. No, it's a good point. And those are not, they wouldn't necessarily be the ones we would look at because they're not as common. But there may be some pockets of claims that can be automated that we wouldn't necessarily look at as from a volume standpoint. So good to call those out. We've got one question on regulation and one on fraud, and I'm trying to figure out which one to go. I think we're going to go with regulation because it came in first. So this is an interesting one that we've certainly heard about when you start having automated claims handling or automated underwriting. If that has to typically be a licensed individual who is doing that process, or automated sales, now it's a computer or it's an algorithm. How does that weigh out? So as you move to more touchless, has there been a response from regulators at all, or just around, is this okay? Does a person need to touch all of those claims even though they're touchless because the computer is not a licensed claims adjuster in that state, for example? Teresa, is that something that you've run into at all? Any sort of regulatory hurdles on the path to bringing more automation into the process?
I haven't run into it at all yet.
Okay, yet. Hopefully we don't see that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Kate, anything that you've seen, has that come up at all?
No, I mean, there's definitely conversations that take place, and I hate to keep bringing up blockchain, but I feel like that one for sure, like there's been conversations with regulators and how something like that would work. It's not something that we've experienced on the types of claims that we're doing for a no touch or low touch process, but it would definitely be something we're always focused on, making sure we're doing it right. We don't want to let something out that we can't be doing it appropriately. So
when I think your response brings up a good point, that it's not us versus them. This is one of these cases where partnering with the regulators, because it's changed for them as well. So working with them on what does this mean for how claims are delivered, all of it, and thinking through these things with them, because they have an obligation to protect consumers, and so they need to be mindful of what all this means and what's the good and what are the things to be careful of. So be on that journey with them as they figure this stuff out too. Michael, I would imagine you wouldn't have a perspective on this, but I think you will on the next one. So can I jump into the fraud question?
Sure.
And then that'll give Teresa and Kate a moment to think about their response. As we move to more automation, and actually I see this come up in almost every webinar when we talk about automation or AI or anything like that, someone flags up, well, then that means you're gonna have higher fraud because things are just flowing through and there's no person to catch them. How are you seeing carriers deal with the question of fraud in a more touchless environment? And actually, is that the right presumption that you can't catch it because no one's stopping the process to look at it?
Well, I mean, fraud, of course, is a big word, right? I think as insurers look to automate claims, there needs to be a focus on, what type of fraud might a solution target, right? Is it fraud related to modification of photos that they may support as evidence of a claim or damage, right? And there's technologies out there. And again, it gets back to the ecosystem. There's technologies that are excellent at identifying any photos that may be manipulated. There's also sources of information where you could kind of understand who that consumer is, whether it be your insured or third-party claimant, where you get some information on them and maybe you run a predictive analytics score and say, maybe I don't want to have a high degree of automation for this particular individual. And then there's network analysis and all other types of solutions that are out there. And I think the industry has really come a long way with predictive analytics and data modeling and off-the-shelf partners that any insurer can work with and bring them into their ecosystem to help score every claim. In addition to internal fraud, I was an auditor for many years at an insurance company, and once you automate claims, you also need some controls about your internal folks to keep an eye on them as well, because they generally would know the control environment. So I think it spans external and internal as an insurer creates that strategy. Both are very important to have solutions for. Yes.
Yeah, maybe this is an example of one of those cases you mentioned where prioritize predictive analytics over business rules. So using tools, using some of that intelligence to help spot the fraud when things are moving more smoothly in an automated fashion. That was another question we have. I'm trying to fit another one in there too. But I would imagine this is one of those cases where using some of the new advanced tools and spotting things and catching patterns versus the standard business rules we've used to flag something to the SIU in the past.
Yeah, I don't think you could create enough scenarios and business rules to be effective in a claims automation for fraud. You really need predictive analytics and multiple types of predictive analytics, not just machine learning, but convolutional neural nets. Take a look at photo imagery, and there's all different disciplines within the fraud space and fraud providers. They all have very specific capabilities, and I think it'll be a culmination of many providers that you want to bring into your claims automation strategy.
Yeah, Teresa, how about for yourself? Has fraud been an issue as you've gotten more straight through in your processing?
Well, that's exactly why I mentioned that, there are certain things that we haven't become touchless on, and is because we need to be on one claims system to get some of that predictive analytics and fraud analytics in place. And it's not conducive for us to deploy that across multiple legacy systems. We're not going to waste IT resources to deploy that. So, that's exactly what we would want to do, is have those predictive analytics and fraud analytics on the front end in our claim center Guidewire system in order to get more touchless claims automated in one claim system. And so we're just not quite there yet, because that's exactly what we'd want to deploy in order to
stay conscious of it. Yeah. Kate, anything from Ohio Mutual that you're seeing as you bring in some more automation and thinking about fraud at the same time?
Sure. I just want to say, don't let fraud or the idea of fraud paralyze you and lead to you not doing some of these initiatives. Worse fraud's going to happen. I think even with some of these tools in place, we've talked about predictive and all these analytics tools, fraud will likely still happen. It's just the nature of our business, but you have to put things in place to prevent it at the absolute best that you can. And from what we've found, we're not the only ones thinking about this. All of the vendors that you're partnering with that bring some of this automation, if you're not building it and they're helping you create these tools, they're thinking about it as well. And they're working to build preventative fraud measures into those tools. So I would say just take advantage of those conversations. Have those conversations, but don't let the idea of fraud paralyze you. Just be strategic about the type of claims that you use automation with. Talk to any vendor partners and take advantage of resources you have internally to make sure that your processes eliminate it the best that you can.
That's great. So we're out of time, but I think that's a really nice note to end on. Is with all of this stuff, it can seem daunting. We can look at barriers to, we can't do this because, Teresa, to your opening point about we haven't done the full transformation of our core system yet. Or, well, we're too small, or we're too big, or we're too stuck in the middle. We can't do this for those reasons, or that technology is not ready yet. We've heard lots of different technologies. We've heard lots of different tools being implemented in different places in different ways. It is all possible. And Kate, I think great point to end on is don't be scared of it, because it can be overwhelming, or we can say, well, that's too much, so I don't want to tread in that water. But we can still experiment and try. And Michael, to your point, these flexible tools that we have access to now allow us to do that without having to, put our careers on the line with every new tool that we try, because there's more flexibility in how we can test and implement and roll them out. So with that, thank you to Kate, to Teresa, to Michael, to all the attendees in the audience who came, and to Reuters Events for putting this on. Great conversation today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.